Morning. I'm just on the porridge again. I quite like making these. So a bit of clattering. I quite like making these videos whilst I'm doing stuff. It's and this kind of activity is just the right level of engagement. What I find, I don't know if you find this, but if I'm doing nothing, you know, if I'm just kind of dedicating my entire thought process to making a video, for example, then I can't do it. It's too, I don't know, it just feels too precious somehow. And if I'm doing something too complicated, if I try and multitask too much, then I can't do it then either. But some activities like walking, driving, and apparently making porridge seem to just use up enough resources that I've got that kind of clear. I don't know exactly what it is, but it just kind of provides a kind of carrier frequency of activity. Which has just got enough content in it that I'm freed up, you know what I mean, so I can let other things happen without thinking too much about it. Which probably means I'm talking shite, of course, that's always that possibility. But that's appropriate, isn't it? Because this is the sea of bullshit, and which I am frolicking in, at least, I hope. But that wasn't what I was thinking of, actually. What I'm thinking of is a Donna Summer song called I Feel Love. I'm sure you know. I think it was probably from the 1980s, was it? Late 70s, early 80s, probably, I don't know. Maybe even later than that, I don't know. It was a great song. It's very picked up by the gay community, as was Donna Summer generally. Associated with all that. I remember it very well, because I was, when was I living then? I was living in Newcastle, I think, or maybe Glasgow. I think I was in Newcastle. And I used to go to a club called Rock Shots, which was a really fantastic nightclub. Most of the time it was a gay club, but then there was like mixed nights. It was really good, really great fun. Yeah, I feel love. That's what I'm thinking about, because it's an interesting phrase that Donna Summer says, isn't it? I feel love. She doesn't say I love and then name the person that she loves, or she doesn't say I love you. She's not just making some kind of statement about her capacity to love. I'm the kind of entity that loves. No, she's saying I feel love. So she's feeling, and love of course is an emotion, a feeling, right? So she's saying I feel an emotion, or I feel a feeling. So kind of doubling up there, isn't there? I am feeling the experience of feeling, or I am feeling my body feeling something, perhaps. I put it like that because there's quite a body of thought in the kind of, I guess, the psychological literature about what an emotion is, or what a feeling is, you know, like love, as Donna Summer presumably is using it. And it's usually phrased as something like the perception of a bodily state. So your body's doing all this stuff, you know, releasing all these hormones, and all these endorphins are kicking off in your brain, all this embodied stuff is going on. But there's a second part of your brain, a second part of your cognitive systems, which are kind of regarding that process, you know, recognizing that process, almost as if your body is feeling something, and then there's another part of your brain which is feeling your body feeling it. Ah, yes, I feel love. You know what I mean? Almost like that. Was it phrenology? Like that. Putting its hands on the head. I don't know. Anyway. And that kind of doubling up is quite interesting, really. I mean, I presume that at least some other animals seem to be able to do that. But not all animals, I don't think, because they don't have the the mental substrate to be able to do it. But which isn't to say they don't feel. Of course they feel. If you've got a nervous system, you feel things, but you may not feel the feeling. You may not have that second chamber, that second house, second order consciousness, which allows you to not only feel but feel the feeling, not only love but feel the love, feel yourself loving, or other kinds of emotions. It's not restricted just to love, is it? You can feel all kinds of things. But that's that kind of secondary order of processing thing. Excuse me a sec. It seems to be one of the features that we have quite a lot of, really. I can't resist looking here at Julian Jaynes. I don't know if you know Julian Jaynes. He's dead now. He was a scientist of some kind. But, he had this great idea, which has got very little merit, as I think, in it. There's no way of proving it. But it was such a nice idea. And it was in a book he wrote called The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. Bicameral means having two chambers. And what he says there is that at some point in the history, and it's kind of recorded history he's talking about, not in our deep evolutionary history, like 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, then at some point in our history, a massive change took place in our cognitive system, he says. We used to have a brain or a mind that was segmented into two relatively distinct parts. And now we don't have one that's segmented in quite that way. But when we did have one that was segmented, what would happen, he claimed, was that a part of our brain that we don't have immediate access to, that isn't us, we don't feel as ourselves, communicates with the part that is ourselves via something like auditory hallucinations. So here we would be having emotions and doing stuff and acting in the world, and then there'd be another part of our brain which would be doing some processing on that, and then would tell us things to do, almost about give us commands. And he reckons, Julian Jaynes reckons, that a lot of the kind of voices in the head stuff you get in religions and in just writings from people like Homer is a result of that. That's the second chamber talking to your first chamber. And then he says, of course, modern consciousness, which doesn't have that echo chamber effect, is a result of the breakdown of that. So we no longer have this second order of consciousness, second part of our brain, which talks to the first part, the more primal part, and that we experience as auditory hallucinations. We don't have that anymore. Our self is now that whole thing, and we kind of talk to ourselves. We have interior monologues, and we know that it's ourself that's talking to us, kind of. So that's that bicameral mind that Jaynes talks about there. It seems to me is another example. I don't know, it's a kind of literal instantiation of this capacity that we have to both feel and feel ourselves feeling, or hear ourselves talking and respond to ourselves. Kind of what I'm doing now, actually. And you see it in other places as well, that idea of a two-part system. Steven Pinker talks about it a little bit in relation to metaphor, and other people like George Lakoff as well, but Pinker talks about it in terms of brain structure, and one possible understanding of how we're capable of doing the kinds of thinking we're capable of doing, which is largely driven by metaphor and analogy, is that the older parts of our brain, which are absolutely engaged with the world and the senses, those structures are somehow kind of cloned into a second order, a second chamber, kind of duplicated but evacuated of content. So all these experiences that I'm having, which have got structure and form and order to them, those are cloned elsewhere and then repurposed as templates for completely abstract ideas. So here's a container, milk container, completely here in the world. I can see it, feel it, touch it, do things with it, put things into it, take things out of it. There's a logic to containers. And all the containers, this peanut jar is a container, has the same logic. It has an interior and exterior, a portal through which things might pass. There's a logic to it. If something's inside the container, it can't be outside the container at the same time. In order to get from the outside to the inside, you have to get through the portal. All that kind of stuff, the logic of containers, someone like Pinker would say, is cloned into our second chamber, but stripped of content. And it's something like that which provides the logic for something like categories. Because when we talk about categories, as the things which feature in logic and maths and just thinking, really, the category of, well, you can think of your own example, but categories follow the same logic as containers, don't they? If something's in a category, then it can't be out of the category, and if something's it maps exactly the same. It can't be both in the category and out of the category at the same time. So we take our category logic from our container logic, and our container logic provides the template and then is duplicated into the second chamber, but devoid of content, as I say. And yeah, the porridge is nearly ready. I've waffled on enough. So yeah, so that's what I'm thinking of. I feel love. It's a great song, though. Yeah. Yeah, so a second chamber of consciousness, whether modern consciousness is like that or not. I think the whole term consciousness is due for a rewrite, actually. I bet in 100 years' time, people will talk about consciousness the way that people now talk about things like life energy or vril or elan vital, that kind of thing. People will still use it, you know, in kind of, because people do still talk about life energy in kind of vernacular ways, don't they? Oh, I've got no energy today, we say. I guess people will still probably use consciousness in those kind of terms, but it won't. I don't think it'll feature at all on the horizon of scientific thought in the way it does now. I think it'll just be kind of broken down. You know, you'll find out the different. It'll be better ways of talking about that phenomenon which deal with the details of it. That's just my thought anyway. Right, porridge is ready. Thank you very much for your attention. 11 minutes exactly.